Namo Namaha, Bhavtam Sarvesham, Hardam Swagatam. Welcome back to my channel Sanskrit Sopanam. I hope you are doing great. I'm also good. And continuing in a series, Learning Sanskrit through Gita, the shloka that we are going to decode today is the 13th shloka of the chapter 1 of Bhagavad Gita. So, a fairly easy shloka, very simple to understand, but through this shloka, we are going to introduce ourselves for the first time to the concept of prayoga in Sanskrit. And what is prayoga? Prayoga is simply voices as you have in English. So, you have active voice, you have passive voice. Different ways how we can construct a sentence, right? So that voice is in English, the counterpart is prayoga in Sanskrit. So quite an interesting topic, prayoga, and it is frequently used in Sanskrit, and it is going to clear a lot of confusion you may have regarding some of the verb forms or kriya pad when you read any Sanskrit text. So we will cover this topic or actually just touch upon it for the first time through this shloka. So without wasting any more time, let's quickly dive in today's video. So as always, I have the shloka ready with me. Let me go through the shloka once. ततशङ्खाश्च भैर्यश्च पनवानख गोमुखाः सहिसैवाभ्यहन्यन्त सशब्दस्तुमुलो भवत्. So this is the shloka that we are going to decode today, and this is the Sandhi Vichhed version of the shloka. So as you can see, quite a handful of sandhis are happening in this shloka. But all of these sandhis we have already covered through the first 10 shlokas. Even though we have covered these sandhis before, but I will advise that you still go through the PDF and see how these sandhis are operating in this particular shloka. Because the more you practice these sandhis and how they are applied in different words, the more you build up your intuitive ability of recognizing any word, of seeing any word in any Sanskrit literature, not just Bhagavad Gita, and quickly identifying in your mind how these words can be break down into its individual words. So suppose you see a word like this, Sahasayavabhya Hanyant, and you are already familiar with the Sandhi rules, you have practiced them again and again, so your mind will immediately break down this word Sahisayev into its individual words, Sahasa Ev Abhyahanyant. This will intuitively build up once you have practiced the Sandhi rules. So please go through that PDF file and keep on practicing these Sandhi rules, because the Sandhi is very important and they come in very handy in decoding any Sanskrit literature, not just Bhagavad Gita. And now let's start decoding the shloka. And as always, we will begin with an anchor word. So this anchor word is coming from here, Abhyahanyant. Abhyahanyant simply means were struck. So this is a verb, a kriya pad. And if we break down this word Abhyahanyant, this comes from Abhi. So this is the upsarga, the prefix. And then verb root, the dhatu is han. Han means to strike. And this dhatu, this verb root han, in past tense, third person, plural form, it becomes ahanyant. Ahanyant. This is the form it takes in this past tense, third person, plural form. And when this ahanyant, it combines with the prefix abhi, the entire word becomes abhyahanyant, which means were struck. Okay, but now you can ask me that in past tense, I can simply say that struck. This is also just a past tense form, right? Why I'm using this were struck? This is because this particular verb form or kriya pad is in passive voice, or as we have in Sanskrit, karmani prayoga. If you have a sentence like the boy reads book, so this is an active voice construct. But if I change it into passive voice, it becomes the book is read by the boy. So is read, and that's why were struck, because the verb form here, the verb form is karmani prayoga. So today we are going to simply introduce ourselves to this topic, this prayoga topic in Sanskrit. So stick till the end where we'll understand this topic, okay? But right now I'll move forward. So I had the anchor word abhyanyant, that simply means were struck. Now I'm asking K. So the question is K what all, that what all were struck? And the response we get from the shloka is Shankhaha cha bhairyaha cha panavanak gomukhaha. Now all these terms in bold, Shankaha, Bhairya, Panavanak, all these are different musical instruments. So in those times during the war, there was separate cavalry that had these musical instruments that were struck to initiate the war or to mark the beginning of the war and to set up the mood for the war, to pump up its soldiers, its warriors, everything. So all these different instruments, maybe you don't identify them with these names, but again, all these instruments belong to the same instrument families we have in the modern times. So Shankhaha, Shankh simply means conch. We already know this musical instrument, and it is a very common Indian household instrument that we keep in temples and everything. Then you have this bhairyaha. So bhairyaha, this comes from the word bhairi. And bhairi again is a musical instrument similar to kettle drum. So most of these instruments, no, they are membrane instruments like congo or bongo or dholak or tabla you have that have membrane on them. And why? Because they produce a much deeper and much thunderous sound. So mostly all these instruments, they just belong to those drum families. So the bhairi instrument, this is similar to kettle drum. And why bhairya? Because this is in again plural form, right? So just as nadi in plural form, it becomes nadyah. So bheri, that is a ikarant word, it changes into bheryah. So to signify that these instruments, they were in multiple numbers. So we are obviously going to use the plural form of all these words. So shankh, it becomes shankhaha. And similarly, bheri, an ikarant word, it becomes bheryah in plural. Then we have panavanak gomukhaha. So all these three instruments, they are combined together in a single word, and this is a combination word or samas. So panav, this again was an ancient war instrument, a very big drum that was kept in the ground and was beaten by the sticks or hands. So panav simply is something similar to that. And then you have anak. So anak, again, this was a different kind of drum that is similar to tabor drums. What are tabor drums? Tabor drums are beaten from one side. So anak, it belongs to the family of those drums that were beaten from the one side. So similar to tabor drums. And gomukha, this was similar to the battle horn. So gomukha, something similar to the battle horn or the war horns that we have. And if you can see that gomukha, this single word alone is in plural form, gomukhaha. But since they are combined in a single combination word, so the plural is only applied to the last word. So this is the property of a particular samas that is happening here. That when similar kind of words, they are combined together, so the vibhakti or the form is just applied to the last word. So panavaha, anakaha, gomukhaha. This is the intended sense because all these are in multiple numbers. But since they are combined together, so panavana gomukhaha. The plural is just applied to this last word. Okay. So, shankhaha, conches, bheryaha, something similar to kettle drums, panav, something similar to war drums, anak, something similar to tabor drums that are beaten from one side, right? And gomukhaha, something similar to battle horns or war horns. And all these instruments, they were struck. Abhyahanyant. Okay, so let's move forward. And now the question is katham. Katham, again, you know, katham is an indeclinable and avyay, and this simply means how, how they were struck. And the response is sahasa ev abhyahanyant. So sahasa, this is also an indeclinable and avyay. This simply means all of a sudden or suddenly. This we use in Hindi also very commonly, common word. So sahasa, all of a sudden, and ev, you already know, something similar to indeed. So all of these instruments, sahasa eva abhyanyant, that all of these instruments were all of a suddenly they were struck. So up till here, you can see we have already covered the majority of the shloka. And this small section of the verse, sah shabdah tumula abhavat, this is simply going to describe the aftermath of whatever happened just now. And let's see what do I mean by that. So abhavat. Abhavat simply means happened, right? Abhavat, you can already guess, this comes from the dhatu, the root bhu. That means to be. So sunrise happens. Suryodha bhavati. So that sort of happens or to be. And abhavat, you can already guess that this is in past tense form. So this is in third person singular past tense form. So mostly whenever you have this anu before the verb form, the kriya pad, so this generally indicates the past tense form. So it is just a quick way to identify that, okay, this particular verb form is in past tense. Abhavat simply means happened. And immediately a question will pop up. What? Like what happened? And the response is shabdah abhavat. So shabda, this is a common word for word, right? And here in the context of the shloka, the shabda, this means noise. So shabdah abhavat, that means noise happened. The base word, the pratipadik shabd, is a akarant pulling word, and here it is in first case singular form. You can already guess the form, right? So moving forward, and the follow-up question we get is kidrishaha, what like? So I'm asking now that describe that noise. And the way it is described in the shloka is tumulaha abhavat. So the base word tumul, this is actually an adjective here. Adjective here for shabdaha. So tumul, this means tumultuous or deafening, thunderous, ear-shattering. So the author is just trying to show you the intensity of that noise. That noise was so spine-chilling. And the word used here is tumula. Tumul, the base word, and since it is an adjective to shabdaha, so it is also following the same word case. So first word case and singular form. So it becomes tumulaha. So in all, saha shabdaha tumula abhavat. This saha, you can already guess, this is just a pronoun. This pronoun that comes from the word tad, right? So saha shabdaha, that means that noise was tumultuous. And that noise, such tumultuous noise, abhavat, happened. And with this, we arrive at the anvay section, the rearrangement part of the shloka. Let me read the anvay first. ततः शंखाः च भैर्यः च पनवानक गोमुखाः सहसा एव अभ्यहन्यन्त. Saha shabdah tumulah abhavat. Okay, and if you'll open the translation also, and okay, this word tataha, so tataha again is an avyay and indeclinable, and tataha simply means thereafter. So tataha, thereafter. Now thereafter what? So if you remember the previous shloka, in the previous shloka, Bhishma, he marks the beginning of the war by shouting loudly and then blowing his conch. So whatever Bhishma Pitama started in the previous shloka, so taking his cue thereafter, all these people now with their instruments and everything, they started this chaos of noise. Okay, so tataha, thereafter, all of a sudden indeed, sahasa ev, all the conches, kettle drums, cymbals, tabors and war horns, all these instruments, shankaha, bheryaha, panavaha, anakaha, gomukhaha, all of these, they were struck. Abhyahanyant. And saha shabdah abhavat, the noise, shabdah, that happened, saha abhavat. How was that noise? That noise was tumulaha. That was tumultuous or thundering, ear deafening. And that was the entirety of the shloka, a fairly easy shloka to understand. The author is just trying to give us the setting, the backdrop of what was happening in the war. That from the Kaurava side, Bhishma Pitama, he initiated the war, and then all of the soldiers, all of the warriors, they took his cue, and then they also started cheering up and then striking their musical instruments and creating this huge calamity of noise to motivate the soldiers, to pump up their soldiers for the war, and to convey to the opposition army, the Pandava army, that okay, they are ready to begin the war. So a fairly easy shloka to understand context wise, but let's now introduce ourselves to the concept of prayoga or voices in Sanskrit, because I think it is the first time we are encountering a verb form, a kriya pad, that is in karmani prayog or is in passive voice. So let's take a quick look at how the prayog or this concept works in Sanskrit. Okay, so what is a voice? What is a prayog? So prayog or voice we are already familiar because we have in English also that you have active voice, simple sentences like boy studies Vedas. This is a simple active voice sentence. But if the same sentence is to be converted into passive voice, it becomes Vedas are studied by boy. So this is the Kartari Prayog and the Karmani Prayog. And now let us understand few things that are important regarding these Prayoga in Sanskrit. So let us start with this verb root, the dhatu pat. Pat simply means to study. Okay. Now we have a simple active voice sentence, boy studies Vedas. And in Sanskrit, this becomes Balakaha Vedan Pathati. So the key things to take note from this sentence is that in active voice or Kartari Prayoga, the more importance is given to the Karta, the subject of the sentence. So who is the subject, the Karta of this sentence? Boy studies Vedas. It is the boy, Balak. So Balak, it becomes in first case and this is given more importance. This is the main theme of the sentence. And Balakaha studies. So Pathati. And since the Karta here is the third person and in single form, so the dhatu, the verb pat, it also assumes the third person singular form verb form and it changes into pathati. So balakaha pathati. And balaka pathati what? So object, the karm here is Vedas. So the balaka studies Vedas. So Veda, the base, the pratipadik, it assumes the second case. So Veda in second case, it will become Vedam. Just as the Ram, it becomes Ramam. So Ved will become Vedam. But since here it is plural, Vedas. So it assumes the plural form. So Ramam, Ramo, Raman. Vedam, Vedau, Vedan. So we choose the plural form, Vedan. So Balakaha Vedan Pathati. Boy studies Vedas. And the thing we take note of is in active voice Kartari Prayog, the Karta is the main theme. Karta is in first case. Ved, the object, is in second case. And Pathati, the verb, it follows the Karta. So if Karta is a single person, so verb also single person. If Karta, it is plural, so the verb also assumes the plural form. Okay, and now let us see the same sentence in the passive voice or Karmani Prayog construct. So in passive voice Karmani Prayog, the same sentence will turn as Vedas are studied by boy. And as you can see by the way it is written also, the object here, the karma, Vedas, this is given more importance. So in Karmani Prayog, in passive voice, the karma is given more importance. And that's why the karma, it comes into first case. So the Pratipadik, the Veda, the base word Veda, it changes into the first case form. So Ved in first case becomes Vedaha. But in plural, it will become Vedaha. Ramaha, Ramau, Ramaha. So Ved, it changes into Vedaha. And now you see this, Vedas are studied by boy. So we already know this case that whenever we use something like by something, with something, whenever that someone or something is an instrument of the action, that through him or through that something is being done. So in that scenario, we use the third case, the Tritiya Vibhakti. So by boy, with boy, in all these scenarios, the Balak, the boy, it will change into third case. So Balak, it will change into Balakena. And now let us come to the verb, are studied. So as we saw in active voice, the verb, it follows the Karta, the one who is doing the action. But in passive voice, the verb, it will follow the karma, the object. And since the object here, Vedas, it is in plural form, so the verb also assumes the plural form. So this pathyante, this is the third person plural form. And now you know why plural form, because here the verb, it follows the object. Since object, they are in multiple numbers, Vedas, studied Vedas. So the verb also, it changes into plural form. So Vedas are studied by a boy, Balakain Vedaha Pathyante. So just as you have the active voice forms of the verb, Patati Patataha Patanti, these are all active voice, the Kartari Prayog forms. So similarly, for any dhatu or any verb root, you also have the karmani prayog, the passive voice forms of the verb. So pathyate, pathyetam, pathyante, these are the passive voice, the karmani prayog forms of the verb. And the key thing to note here is in passive voice karmani prayog, the karma, the object is the main theme. That's why the karma becomes in first case, and the karta, the subject, it happens in third case. Why? Because again, that karta becomes the instrument of doing that action. By boy, by this, with this. So in all these scenarios, we use the third case. And most importantly, the verb, it follows the karma. So if karma is plural, the verb will also assume the plural form. And if the karma is singular, so the verb will also assume the singular form. Okay, so let us take a look at another example. This example is quite similar to what we already have in the shloka also. So han dhatu, that means to strike. This is the verb root. And in active voice, you can have a sentence like they struck conches. And in Sanskrit, they struck conches, it becomes te shankhan agnan. So this te, this comes, you can assume, this comes from the pronoun tad. So tad, that simply means that. And in first case, plural form, it becomes te. So sah, tau, te. These are the three forms. We are using the plural forms. So te. Struck. So struck, han dhatu. And since we are using the past tense, so we are use past tense third person plural form. Why third person plural form? Because again, the verb will follow the karta, the subject. And since the subject is third person plural, so the verb also will assume the third person plural form. And in third person plural form, han dhatu, it changes into agnan. So they struck conches. Te agnan, this conches. Now the conches here is the object, the karma. And in kartari prayog, the karma, it assumes the second case. And since conches plural, so it will assume second case plural form. And it changes into shankhan. So te shankhan agnan. This is how the sentence will form in active voice. And the same sentence in passive voice, it will become conches were struck by them. And now you can see were struck. Why in our actual shloka, abhyahanyant. Why I wrote were struck? Because the sentence formation in the shloka, this is in passive voice, karmani prayog. So conches were struck by them. So the object, conch, the shank, the object, the karma, it becomes the main character. It is given the most importance. And that's why it becomes in first case. And plural, so first case plural. So shankha, in first case plural, it will become shankhaha. And by them. Okay, so instead of they struck conches, I am writing conches were struck by them. So we will use the third case of tad pronoun, third case and plural, because again plural people. And third case plural of tad is tahi. That simply means by them. And were struck, to denote this dhatu, han dhatu, this will assume the third person and plural, because again conscious, the karm here is in plural. So third person plural and karmani prayoga form. And it will change into ahanyant. Okay, so the conches were struck by them, tahi shankhaha ahanyant. This becomes the sentence. But the only key point or the only takeaway from this entire conversation is that in kartari prayoga, the subject, the karta is given the most important, and that's why it is in first case. The object, the karma, it becomes in second case, and the verb, the kriya, it will follow the subject. And in passive voice, karmani prayoga, the object, the karma is given the most importance, and that's why the object, it happens in first case, and the subject, it changes into third case. Why third case? Because we get the sense of the book was read by boy. So by, with all these scenarios, we use the third case, right? And the verb, the kriya, it follows the object, it follows the karma. So in a sentence like a book is read by boy, so there is a single object, singular object, so the verb will be in single form, right? But if the sentence goes something like the books are read by boy, so the object, the karma here are multiple in numbers, plural. So the verb also will become plural because the verb, it follows the karma, the object. So this is the only key difference between active voice and passive voice, kartari prayog and karmani prayog. And so I agree a lot of things I just discussed, but don't fret about getting all the things at once. If you only get the part of it, that is fine. Just remember the key points that we discussed in the last. And the reason I wanted to give an introduction of this is because in Sanskrit, we have a lot of sentences that are constructed in passive voice or karmani prayog. Because in English, we generally don't use passive voice, right? In our normal conversations and everything, we generally make active voices sentences. But why Sanskrit? It uses the majority of sentences in karmani prayog, passive voice. So it has a very beautiful reason to it, and the reason is almost spiritual. But what is the reason? I'll discuss in the next video, whenever the next time we encounter this passive voice verb form. So I'll wrap up the session now. I hope you get something of value from these videos, and if you do so, kindly share these videos with someone else you think might benefit from these videos, and kindly subscribe to my channel, hit the bell icon so that you get the instant update whenever I upload a new video. And so I'll see you in another video, in another shloka, and until then, stay awesome, stay happy. Vayam punah milamaha. Dhanyavad.